Okay. All right, everyone. We're on tonight with Erik Stromberg. He is running for Grantsville City Council. So we've got Grantsville City Councilman back to back last night and then tonight. So we're just going to have him, kind of take it away and lay out his format that he kind of is running on, what he wants to see happen in Grantsville, what he wants to accomplish while he's there. So, Erik, take it away, and we'll hammer you with questions either from watchers or listeners as it comes in, or with any of our own.
All right. No, that sounds great. Yeah, I really appreciate it, Jared. The opportunity to get out and present, and for you for doing this, right? I think I know you were at the chamber event we had a couple weeks ago, and we were met with the realtors yesterday, I believe that was, and even at the city library earlier in the week. And one thing with some of those venues, the time frame you get when you get 3 minutes, you can't. That's not a lot to get your message out there, or even 7 minutes we had at the library. So I really appreciate this opportunity. So just a little bit, I guess, background on myself for anyone that's watching that doesn't know. So I've said that the theme for the Grantsville candidates is, that lifelong resident. I think all of us, for the most part, born and raised and have lived there our whole life. So for me, it isn't any different. Grantsville is where I grew up, and that, where I've lived. With that, right, I know what a great place it is, right? Whether it's Grantsville, I mean, I am partial to Grantsville, but the valley itself, right? We do have quite the gem out here, and we know, that's happening and growth. And I know we'll spend some time talking about the growth because everyone's, found that. But yeah, and I guess you could say I've had a little bit of a front seat row to some of this. I've served on planning and zoning for the last 12 years. And I get a lot of heat, if you will, for that. I get blamed for a lot of the growth. And the one thing, and I'll just say, that's from the Planning and Zoning Commission, right? One of the things they have is the ordinance are before them, right? We have to just look at the ordinances and say, does this fit, right? So if someone comes in and says, hey, I want to build development and there's half-acre lots, if it's zoned for that, we say yes. That's what the zoning is. If they're coming in and asking for a zone change, if the future land use map says half-acre lots is what we've identified that as, and they want to go half-acre lots, we say yes, that's what you get, right? We have to make that. So from a planning and zoning standpoint, we are there just to follow the rules and the ordinances that the city council has put in place. And for me, that's part of why I want to make this transition, why I want to move on to city council, is because I have seen where I think we could do things different, right? We maybe aren't hearing the voices of everybody. And so let's look and say, how can we make the changes to some of those ordinances that I've been frustrated with as a member of planning and zoning, where a little bit of my hands are tied. Just because the way city government works.
What particular zoning changes would you like to see made?
So, I think, and I actually wrote up a post I put on Facebook today about this, right? We just went through, we had a moratorium, right? The popular word right now, moratoriums, right? We did one to redo the master plan and the future land use map. Right. And we went through and did that. So we ended up, it was supposed to be 6 months. We weren't done. I think we extended it for an additional 3. So I think we had 6 months where there was no development while we worked on that. And I think in that, I think there was 2 areas that we missed. Right. I think one, I don't think we did enough to protect some of our agricultural and larger lots. I think there was an opportunity to say, hey, let's go ahead and designate some 1-acre lots, some 2.5. There's only a small area in Grantsville that the future land use map has anything larger than 1 acre. And that's down towards, like, say, off of Hell Street, down around like Palomino Estates. There is some zoning down there for 2.5. Everything else is half acre or smaller, right? So I think we missed the opportunity to say, where could we have some bigger lots? The other area that I think we missed is really understanding, and it may not be so much as zoning, but what we're going to allow, right? We did bring in some mixed use, which will allow for some smaller lots. But that's to me where we're really struggling as well, is accepting of smaller lot sizes, which then of course is, smaller homes. So we have more affordability. There's an article in KSL today that it was talking about that. I think it was less than half the populations, can afford the houses based upon their income, right? The median house. And we're no different in Grantsville, right? We have the market has priced, and as city council, mayor, right, city officials, we can't control housing prices, right? That's by, material demand, all those things. But the bigger the lot, the bigger the house, we know the price is going to go up, right? So where are those other opportunities for someone that's looking for a first-time home, a starter home, right? And those are the opportunities. And I think that's what we miss. And also, I think there are people out there that they don't have the interest in a half acre or 1 acre, right? They're not going to raise horses. They don't have that. They're looking for a smaller home, easier upkeep. And really, even I think there's people out there that are interested in apartments. And, Grantsville has really fought that idea about apartments. And I think we need to be open to all those opportunities.
Yeah, we need to bring more housing competition in, that's for sure. And I think that's statewide. We need to figure out how to bring more housing opportunity in where it seems like everybody universally has that general complaint that housing is too expensive, too hard to find, and quite frankly, kind of prices some people out of the ability. So yeah, I like where your head's at on that.
Well,
Yeah, I look at it today, I'm like, how in the world, when I see some of the prices, how would someone start a home, right? I look at, my kids. I have a senior in high school, right? And I look at, he goes off to college, and, I would hope maybe, he'd have the desire to come back here. So I have kids close. As he starts a family, I have my grandkids close, but I'm like, where? Right? How would they be able to afford it? What are the options?
Mm-hmm.
so can we categorize you as a growth candidate rather than conserve the growth, or where do you place yourself on that scale?
Yeah, if you were going to say that, I don't have a problem with growth, right? And if you look at it, if nothing else, we are going to grow just because future generations are going to live here, right? But I'll say it this way, I don't have a problem with people wanting to move into the valley, right? We know we have the gem here, right? So it's going to happen, right? So I support the growth. We just need to manage it and have the vision of what does it look like, right? We can't, I've said it this way, right? We can't, bury our heads in the sand and just, let it go, whatever it is, right? We need a plan for it and say, hey, what does it look like? Where can we maintain that rural, residential, Western, whatever the term you want to put is Grantsville with some open space? Where do we want that? But also, where can we have, those smaller lots, third acre lots, quarter acre lots, whatever, small houses, and we can have that mix with that. And I think with some of the, annexation and the expansion Grantsville had, I think we're able to look at that and say, where does that fit? And with that, where do we bring in, that economic development, right? Where do we bring in commercial opportunities? Where do we bring in other businesses? Right. And it's a little bit of that chicken and egg type situation, right? As we get more residents, as we get more rooftops, the businesses come, right? And as we get more, businesses, the next business, the bigger businesses, come, those retail opportunities, the restaurants, all of that follows. And of course, as you get more of those, then we get more people wanting to move out here as well.
Well, yeah, and also you brought up a good point about you want your child to possibly come back here, and for those people who are anti-growth, I think you need to take a hard look at that, because if you eliminate the growth, that means that some of your kids are going to have to move away.
Yep.
And so I think that's important to think about. And quite honestly, I just think bringing more competition into it will only make everything more affordable. It'll only drive the prices further down and everything else. And I think that's been a big stump that I've had every time I've talked to anyone local.
Well, it won't make water more affordable though, Jared. So.
Yeah.
And we'll get on water just a second, so I know that's a hot topic. But the one thing I want to say, the other thing I hear a lot is, hey, is there some way we can control the number of building permits, right? Set a percentage of growth. And I think there's some value in looking at those opportunities, right? Do we want to limit the growth? The one thing I think we have to keep in mind is a lot of times people think of growth as just those developers, right? These big, subdivisions that are going in. Well, if you're going to say, okay, we're only going to allow so many building permits, well, what about that person that has the land and they just want to go build a house now on it? Right? Maybe a family broke up some land, a child's moving back, a brother, a sister's moving back, and they want to build. Well, so now do we have this like a lottery system, or January 1st of every year you have people lining up to get the first 100 building permits, and if you show up in September to build your home, all the building permits are gone, and come stand at City Hall the first of the year and hope. So I think when these ideas get thrown out, what does it really look like? How do you implement some of these growth rates? Because it's not just the developers, if you will, that are going to be impacted by that. It is current residents of Grantsville that are just looking for that next opportunity, right? That next thing. They're not developing, they just want to build.
Yeah, that
I think
they break up property, or someone maybe bought property and wants to build their home to retire in and put their current home that they raised 5 kids in on the market and move into something smaller.
Yep.
Yeah, that's a good point. I don't think there's a one size fits all. That's for sure.
Yeah.
And I don't think I'm not a fan of government laying down blanket rules. It seems to always have a state of backfire in there.
Yeah, and I mean, I think that a good example of that, so part of what we did with the master plan and subdivisions is there is now a requirement of any development, right? So if you're coming in to do a subdivision, you have to give up 10% of that property, either in the ground itself, or pay a fee in lieu of that's equal to that, right? And part of that was hearing the residents of Grantsville saying we wanted open space. We want open space. So we put that in there. A couple things we found is there isn't any direction of what does open space mean, right? And even when you talk to residents of Grantsville, we get different things. Open space is the alfalfa fields in their backyard. Open space is the parks, right, and the recreational facilities. Other people think the open fields are the sagebrush, fields that are just natural, right? So you get that range of what is open space. But the other thing that we found, going back to just the government laying down those rules, is that applies no matter what, right? So we've actually seen where we maybe have overdone, or at least in my opinion, and I know other members of the Planning and Zoning Commission kind of feel the same way, is because where we've had some individuals that have come in, say with their 2 acres, that they would just like to break it up and maybe allow a family member to build on that other acre. Well, now they're having to give up or pay the city, 10% of that. Right, because the city doesn't want a quarter of an acre of a lot. That's not going to do me good, right? So now they're paying the fee. So I think that's a case of where we had good intentions, but we missed by just having a blanket statement. So I think again, that's one of those things where we have to look at and say, what's the intent that we're going for here, and how do we make it work versus just some of these blanket statements.
Yeah, and long-term blanket statements. It's a tough question, and again, you have to, there obviously is going to be some people in Grantsville you have to convince, or maybe you can't convince them. You have to listen to and figure out a middle ground with. There is still a lot of property out there, and a lot of farms are getting smaller and more productive.
Yep.
So.
Yeah, and right across the street from me, I live on Cork Street, and Matthew's own property across the street from me. And part of, again, going back to the master plan, right? Master plan said those could be down to half-acre lots, right? So between Cork and Willow, that property is all half-acre lots. We've had 2 of the property owners that have that. They've come in and asked for that rezone. And really what they've said, and specifically with like Matthews, is they know that day's going to come, right? When it goes on to their kids and no one's going to want to farm it.
Yeah.
Right. And that's what we're seeing, is that the younger generations, those future generations, aren't the farmers, right?
Well,
and so they see the dollar signs.
Or they've decided to farm in another state.
Yeah, or they've moved on.
Yeah.
They've moved someplace else. Absolutely.
I know Kyle, he left. He went north.
He's north.
He's got better farmland up there, and well, more workable, more prosperous system. And I don't know whether it's the irrigation that's, it could be multiple things. And growth does run farms out. And a lot of their farmland is in what is either the center of town or quickly going to be.
And neighbors complain a lot when you got a farm next to you, and kind of.
And I will say with that, I will always maintain that, if that farm was there first, that horse was there, that cow, absolutely, that's their right. If you moved in next to it, I will never push a farm out. That way, right? Because that's what I grew up next to, right? Where I grew up, we had horses next door. I mean, to me, I'm going to say there's nothing better than, in the early summer, having the windows open, hearing the sprinklers watering that alpha field, and, the smell of that farm, right? I mean, that's what I grew up to. So for me, I'll always maintain that. But you're right. We do have folks that will complain, but it's not going to stay that way forever. Right? We have to know that it's going to change.
Yeah. And most cities do not run the farms out. Most of the time it's just the farmers who, when they have their property and they're working it and the new neighbors move in, it's just the pressure of the new neighbors making complaints over and over. And it becomes a toxic environment. And then when cities move in, let's face it, the farmer's land automatically jumps in value. And so it's cheaper. It's not just cheaper, but more cost effective. And they usually actually make good returns to sell off that land that's desirable to build on, and then head to somewhere where, it's a little more free and open. And then again, you get into a more farming community, and suddenly water's not as big of an issue anymore.
Yeah.
So there is the both sides of that. Is there any other, we've got the housing thing, or the growth thing, I should just say. I think that's extremely important. And you jumped right out of the gate with an idea on that. Is there any other kind of stance or any other objectives you kind of have running?
Well, and I think, the other big one, right, that has come up this year, obviously, is water. And the conversations I've had with, folks in Grantsville, one, we got to make sure, and I think we're getting the message out there, there is a clear difference between the culinary water that Grantsville City provides and the irrigation water that's coming from the reservoir by Grantsville Irrigation Company, right? They are two separate. Grantsville City does not have the control over those water shares, right? So when people are like, hey, we didn't have as much water. Well, from a share perspective, if you're running irrigation water, yeah, that is true. If you're someone that doesn't have irrigation, there weren't restrictions in place, right? Now, could there have been something, I think that's something we need to look at, right? Are there things from the culinary where we have to say, hey, when we have a drought year, should we do something better, right? Should we, do more than just encourage people to conserve water? I don't know. I think we need to look at it. I do think, though, when it comes to that secondary water, right? So today, again, a developer, right, comes in, they say, I have 100 water shares to go with it. So when it comes to impact fees, those water shares are accepted versus paying some of those impact fees, right? We, as the city, would accept that. The problem I see with that is those water shares, those 100 shares, have no value in as far as how much water you're bringing, right? So I do have a couple of shares where I live. When I first moved to my home, I had 250,000 gallons per share. This last year, we started off at 50. Well, that's, a fifth, right? That's a big difference. So how does the city know when a developer comes in and says, I have 100 shares, that we're actually getting anything from it? So I think we need to stop accepting those shares for secondary water. Right? One, because we don't know the value, and two, there's no way of enforcing a homeowner to use that secondary water. Right. Yeah. So this last year, right, a lot of folks, because of the situation, right, they were supplementing that, secondary irrigation water with culinary water. Right. So yes, that they are paying that fee back to the city, but the impact as far as the water rights, right, that are coming through the city wells was not accounted for. So I think we need to look at that and say, unless there's some way of, working better with or getting some controls, which I don't see how that could happen from the city on those shares from the irrigation company, because they are their own entity. I think we need to look at it as it's not the same, right? We can't accept that. If a developer wants to offer that as a perk to moving into their subdivision where you have that, great, but they still need to pay and bring the water rights for every bit of water, right? Call it into the house as well as secondary.
Yeah. Yeah, and I mean that does leave a big blind spot if you don't know where the water is and where it's been used. And I've mentioned this to every candidate. I think that conservation's a great idea, and I think the city needs to step up and be the first to model that. And that means where you can, we need to remove grass from public, around public buildings. The library, the Justice Center, the City Hall, I would say by the fire station, all park strips, probably some parts of the actual park, the high school. We need to look at trying to do a zero-scape around there and do it not all at once, because that'd bankrupt the city, but do it in a process,
Yeah.
Eric, are we a free market system when it comes to the price of our water?
So it's when you're talking about like what the residents are paying.
Yes.
Is that? Yeah. So it is. I mean, so there are terms that are set by the city. And my understanding is those are set even at the state level, where we have to do tiered pricing for that. I believe it was part of. I mean, this legislature put some things in place that forced that, and as part of the Main Street Water Project, when they did that, that was in order to get some of the funds from the state. We had to do that tiered pricing. Mm-hmm. So the city can set the pricing within limits, as most things are, and then obviously the more you use, the more you're going to pay. So I don't know if that.
Yeah, it kind of escalates the more you use. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah.
Okay.
And that's the thing. And so I guess, in some ways that would provide a small incentive to minimize your use, right? Mm-hmm. So you can lower, it's, different, right? I mean, energy, Rocky Mountain Power, right? There's tiers, the more you use, right? So some people may say, hey, I'm going to have my air conditioner a little bit warmer in the summer, so I don't have to pay quite as much, right? Same thing. I can maybe water a little bit less, right? So you mentioned zero-scaping, and I think, one, we have to recognize we do live in a desert. I think at times we forget about that, right? Until we have a year like this last year, worst drought we've had in however many years, but we are in a desert. So, maybe we should embrace that and take on, like you say, within the city, let's look at where can we come in and do desert and zero-scaping. Right? You go down to southern Utah, down St. George, you see that. Why shouldn't we do something similar here? I actually, a year ago, right, with some of the changes we were seeing in the decrease, I had the plan. I'm like, hey, we're going to zero-scape our front yard. That was in the works. We had that plan, and then we find out how much water we have, and I'm like, great, we did it. So we ripped out all of our front yard, right, about 1,500 square feet of grass in the front yard, pulled it all out. And now I've come in and put rocks in, working on getting some, drought tolerant plants in, just to conserve, where we're using the water. For me, I realized, hey, the front yard being, green grass is just for the looks. Well, I can come in and do some xeriscape that would look just as well, and that gives me water from my backyard where we spend our time as a family and the kids play.
Yeah.
And so I think we can do those kind of things. I'm going to say, I think there's ways we can incentivize people there as well, right? I'm not a fan of government handing out money, but I do know there are things out there that we could look and say, make people aware, right? And there are rebates and stuff like that for doing, smart sprinklers and, different things like that. Make folks aware of that to say, hey, what can you do?
But there is a system that will allow whoever it is distributing our water to increase the price the more scarce it becomes. They just have to do it in a tiered environment, because really the only way that you can make a resource valuable is by putting more value on it.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, back to the, I think the city should start taking steps to, blaze the trail and be that spearhead. The city shouldn't, on any new city buildings, it should just become policy. We don't put grass anywhere around it. I mean, even at the high school, I went to school there. I don't remember once eating lunch on that grass. We don't need it.
Well, I think you can look at all the schools, and again, that's, the school district, it's their land, it's their property, right? But I think, again, we could work with them. You got the high school, right? There's a lot of lawn along Cherry and along Quirk for the high school, right? The junior high, right? Same thing. You got, they're along Durfee.
We still want the ball fields. The ball fields need grass.
Yeah,
and
absolutely.
We get that, and we completely agree with that. But if we cut the grass out from in front and down the side of the school, no grass in the park strips, keep places like that where the city has a manageability. I think that's a great idea. And let's face it, isn't xeriscaping easier to maintain?
Yeah, for me, there was that transition this last summer, and it pretty much took all summer to get the grass all gone, get the leveled out, and start hauling in the gravel. But I don't have the front yard to mow next summer, right? We get summer. I wander out with some Roundup and kill the weeds, just make sure they're not coming through, and it's going to save me time, right? So that's how I look at it for myself. It's no different for the city or anyone else, right? You're going to save some of that maintenance. To do it, it might take some time, but you do get that.
And when we talked with Scott Stice, he mentioned maybe set up a deal where if you agree to tear out your park strip, the city can find a way to get a deal to get rock for you. So maybe the city buys it in bulk, so it's at a cheaper price, or if it's cost effective enough for the city as a whole, they say, we can drop it off at your park strip. I don't know. That's something that's going to happen when the budget groups get together. Yeah. But, you can think outside the box and come up with ways to incentivize. And that's I think just taking out park strips, imagine what that would save year over year.
Or just having a method of asking the constituents, is this something that you would like to pursue? I mean, you can invent the government program, but if you don't at least survey the population's opinion, then you could be wasting a lot of money.
Yeah, you could. Yeah.
Yeah. And I think that's a little bit like I say, it is some education, right? If you've been around here, you grew up here, right? You're used to seeing green grass, and that was what was in a yard. My grandmother couldn't imagine anyone not having grass in their yard. Yeah. She'd look at people that had done something other than, she's like, look at how much work that is, and whatever. And to her, it was green grass, and mowing was easy, right? Because she wasn't the one doing it. It was my grandpa that was doing it, of course. But it's that education of what he wants. So I think in time you are going to see people that would want to do that, right? So, and if there is a way to make it easy, hey, the city's going to negotiate a bulk rate, come get it. Or we've negotiated with such and such, contractor, multiple ones in there, show up on, this weekend or whatever it is, and you're going to get a low rate. I think something like that's great. I know when we were at the realtors, there was talking, and I don't know all the details, but it does look like there is some sort of water conservation district that's being looked at in the valley as a whole. Right. And to be able to look and say, how do we bring some water in? So not Grantsville City, not Tooele City, but a separate entity. right? So there might be opportunities for them to do, like I know they've done up around in the Weber area, where that group, that water district, has other incentives that are provided to you if you do zero-scape. Right, so that entity is the one that's finding the money. It's not coming from Grantsville City's budget, but they're saying, hey, if you come and take out your grass and you put in so much, they're giving you money for that. And in that case, I actually did some numbers because I was disappointed. We didn't qualify out here because that's not where we're getting their water. But I could have probably paid for all the rock through their incentives that they were doing for my whole yard.
Yeah.
So there are opportunities out there. I think we're just now, unfortunately, because of the situations, we're a little bit behind the eight ball, right? And we're playing catch up.
Yeah, and that's a rough situation to be in. Wish we would have been able to plan ahead, but well, and I want to put this offer out. I want to put an offer out to all the cities, all the groups that, if there is a message to get out or something else, please just shoot me or Dave a message and we'll throw it on there. Throw it on the show here and everything else. I think that's ideally that's where we'd kind of like to end up being a replacement for the newspapers that have died.
Yeah.
A slower one with a guy that can't talk and another guy that wears a goofy hat, but we can be that. No, I like that. And we do have a question real quick, if you don't mind throwing in an answer. So Craig says, can the city require builders to zero-scape park strips so not so much water is wasted into gutters? So like when the developers come in, can that be a requirement that the city adds to the developer's thing?
Yeah, I mean, so a couple of things with that. So today, in the process, right, they would meet with a developer. They go through DRCs. They go through, development plans and agreements and like that. So today they could come to an agreement outside of any city ordinance asking for that. Right, so that is in place today to have those conversations and get a developer to agree to that. I do think it's something we could look at going forward, though, and make it more of a city ordinance potentially, right? That says, the entrances, the park strip should be zero-scaped. Again, that kind of where you come down to, do we want it to be, a city ordinance and the government coming giving you a law, or do we want to work it out? So there are both. That today there are ways to work that out and do that. Going forward, I think we could do a little more. Though the one thing though we definitely need to be careful of along those lines. So development that's currently in the works. And again, this is kind of some of those things that from difference between planning and zoning and city council, right? So they come to us with city council, and one of the line items was they wanted to, because they were doing zero-scape, they didn't want to provide as much water as the requirement. Okay?
Yeah.
So as planning and zoning, I can see that, but I can't say yay or no. Nay, I can just say that's a really bad idea, right? That's something that city council has to work out. So I think we have to be careful with that. Is just because you come and say, hey, we're not going to use as much water, we don't want to provide as much. Again, we can't control the homeowner.
Yeah.
Right? So I think we need to be careful of that and not use it as now a negotiation to let the builders not give us what they need to give us.
Maybe have a ordinance written that there is no park strips are I don't know, maybe make them straight concrete, make a or zero-scape. I'm wondering, ideally, how could you incentivize current residents to maybe think about the notions of them zero-scaping? So maybe come out one year and if this would obviously probably be better run through the irrigation company, but say, they'll give you, if you zero-scape, even if you find all the rebates and everything else available out there, but the irrigation company will, knock $2 off every month of your bill, just the park strip. We could start just there.
Yeah.
And
I think that's, you mentioned irrigation company again, they are separate, but I do think the irrigation company has a responsibility as well to maintain that resource of the water, right? It's not, again, as a city we can't, but I think they need to say, what can we do as a company to, again, incentivize our customers to not use every bit of their water shares, right? Or to conserve in some way. A lot of the mentality of those water shares is I've paid for my X number of shares, so I'm going to use it, right? Because that's what I'm entitled to. And I think we've seen that where we've gone times without being metered, right? Everyone's just running them crazy. The water's on, it's April, it's raining outside, but I'm not being metered, so I'm going to turn on my sprinklers, right? So I think that's where, again, I think we need to look at it as the natural resource, right? The commodity that water is, and how do we conserve it, right? How do we make sure it's there for as long as possible? So, educating on zero-scaping, providing some incentives. Unfortunately, we are, I don't know if I want to say just a people as a whole, a nation, but we work by incentive, right? You got to give me something, right? So just to say, please don't use the water, doesn't work, right? It's a little bit of a carrot or a stick. And I'd much rather you work with the carrot and give you something to incentivize you to, zero-scape a park strip, cut down on the amount of grass you're doing, something like that, versus say, guess what? You can only water on Tuesdays and Thursdays every other week from 8 a.m. to, 6 a.m. to 8 a.m., right? To me, that starts getting into the stick.
Yeah. And it would be a good idea to, I think, educate and that's, again, I think where the city needs to kind of lead the way. The city, not only can they do it, but they can, maybe the city, you could have the workers document what they did along the way, how they did it, and what steps they had to go through. And, kind of rate the job, it wasn't that bad of a job. Here's where we got the stuff. And then as the city starts doing that, like in that new, the City Works building down there, they've got grass out front of that it's, Scott talked about this. It's small enough that it looks like you could push the lawnmower on it, start it up, shut it off, and go park the lawnmower. Well, if they started out zero-scaping that and have the city could look for what different rebates are out there and everything else, because that would also save the taxpayers money, and then say, look, we tried it out on this spot. Here's the deals we found. This half we found these deals. This half we found these deals. Split it with the sidewalk, however. And then you can document, educate, and, and show people that, this is possible and this is how much you're looking at, and give them an idea. Maybe, get the worm stuck in their brain. Because that's what I've been this summer. I've decided to start, doing a zero-scaping as best I can. It's a slow process. It's not cheap, as you know. And so I'm going to start out with the park strip. But to defeat watering, twice a week, I've only had to water about every 9 or 10 days. But I've had to grow my lawn like a dirty hippie. My lawn is, 8 inches long. So it's green and it shades itself. So it conserves water that way by providing its own shade. But I've got to go out and comb it all the time. And, it's so, and then it's had a bad effect on the tree that's sitting there because it feels like it hasn't had enough water.
The best way to let it happen is to allow the free market's invisible hand to take effect. Once people realize how much they're paying for water as the price gets jacked up, you're going to see people just naturally educating themselves. I mean, it's got to be an organic effect. I really think the more you make it organic, the more you will find that it'll be effective. And that is using the free market economy. Allow the price to go up. And it will go up as we develop. If you want people to come into this area, they're going to have to pay more for water. And I think that's what happened in St. George. I don't think
St. George never really had a lawn culture, though.
Yeah.
I don't think they ever did. Just like Arizona.
Could they? Could they even have a lawn culture?
I don't know. But
it'd be tough in those temperatures. Yeah. And, Jared, as you were talking about like that leading by example, I was thinking, I think of the tree program the city does, right? So they've gone through it, and those trees are ones that grow here in our climate, our soil conditions, right? So, and I've bought a couple of those when we moved in here, and they have done well. And I think the same thing, one thing that we've struggled with in doing the xeriscaping is educating ourselves on the right type of plants that are going to grow, right? They're drought. So, as you think about the city leading by example, as the city's putting in these plants, now they can show, hey, this is what's going to grow, right? They can provide that out to say, here's some options for you, right? Again, saving some of that time for the residents of Grantsville to know what's going to work, right? And giving them an opportunity to look at it.
Mm-hmm.
Eric, what's the tree program? I'm unaware of this.
Yeah, so the city does, and obviously the last year's been a little weird, so maybe it didn't happen this past year. But in the past, you could buy trees at a discounted rate. I think it was about half the price, and put in the park strip, right? It was incentivizing growing trees, right? And I think even as we talk xeriscaping, I think it could still work, right? You could still put a tree in your park strip, right? But then instead of it being surrounded by grass, it's surrounded by gravel. So you can buy these trees in the spring. Again, it's been like 10 years since I bought mine through the city, but it's like half price. And so you're getting a $150 tree for $75, and maybe it was even less than that. Don't go, quote
Probably
me
depends on the
prices.
tree, but yeah.
Yeah, depending on the tree. I mean, they're decent sized trees, right, to start with. And I think even if you were going to place them somewhere other than the park strip, I think you could still get them discounted. Right. It was just, again, a way. The city's gone out. They've negotiated some great pricing. You put an order in, and, they just told you when they got shipped there at City Hall, and you went and picked them up.
How would we, when the city did that, how did they advertise it?
I saw it, obviously. I think, as the mayor was doing his newsletter, it was in there. I hear lots of people say they don't read it. They do read it, right? It's just that change in how we communicate. It's, we're not getting that paper bill, so we don't have it in our hand, right? So it is that cultural shift on it, kind of as you talked about with the newspaper, of getting people to say, hey, you know what, you maybe should look at your email, or you may have to get a Facebook account, even if you don't. There is just that education as we make this shift in technology.
Yeah. And I mean, here's another, crazy notion. Internet space is almost free. And maybe cities and groups need to start using that, where maybe a city could start a YouTube channel and just, have an advert, if they make an ad, you patch it into, whatever initiative is finished, you just drop that off and, and add the next one in, upload the new YouTube, and that'd be something that if people are interested in, it's not personalized, it's not anything like that, but it just kind of advertises what the city has going on, what to expect. And hopefully the cities, if they're going to do like that, they need to advertise that way out.
Are the Grantsville city councils, are they live broadcast like the Tooele ones?
They are, yeah. So both city council and planning and zoning obviously have become, Zoom has just become part of our world anymore, right? So they are broadcast.
Yeah. And we're going to try to join in, either come in person or joining in by Zoom and doing a rebroadcast where we sit and get drunk and talk crap about it. I think that'd be a good time.
The critique, I'll have to watch for that.
Yeah. Well, you'll be sitting up there and I'll be critiquing you.
Then I'll do the Monday morning quarterback and watch it after the fact, see where I could have done better.
Yeah. Well, but no, that's the thing. And yes, it's dry stuff. The average person's not really going to get involved, but I do like that the cities are doing that now. It's just making availability to know what's going on in your community just that more possible.
It is very dry material to watch, and it's very lengthy to watch. It would be nice maybe like the week after you actually have your meeting, maybe you broke it down into like really quick tidbits, and
maybe that's what we'll do.
Present it in the beginning of the next meeting, and then that way you got like a quick debrief.
Like
of-
when you watch the WWF, they show the first week's wins and best
right,
max.
exactly.
I was thinking, NFL, I can go on Monday morning, jump on YouTube, and I
Yeah.
can watch, a couple
Watch the
games in a
highlights.
matter of like 5 minutes, and I've seen
Mhm.
what I cared about.
Yeah, but
So
here's the question: who's the sorry sucker who has to cut up that highlight reel?
Not me.
yeah,
Dude, you're a safety guy. You're a policy wonk. You'd be ideal for that job.
Yeah.
But yeah. So, all right, we've had you on here for almost an hour. So, and we've occupied plenty of time with housing, and that seems to be a big subject is growth, housing, and water. I've got my ideas on what we need to do to make housing more available and affordable, and I think all cities in this whole valley need to figure out how to incentivize houses to be built, just some of them, but how to get smaller and more affordable houses so we have an actual starter home. Because right now, houses being built are not starter homes. I don't care. There's no newlyweds maybe expecting that needs a 5-bedroom house. There's no need for that, and it's hard for them to get that. They generally have to jump in too deep on loans, and that kind of sets them back in life. So my thing is, I think we need to have a look at the regulatory costs and how can we dial those down, even if we're just on some of the homes to get some, some smaller houses built at maybe $150,000 range, and that'll drive the apartment prices down too, which also needs to come down. So we've gone into that, and I'm just going to give that spiel to everyone running. But go ahead. We want to let you use this last little bit to just kind of sell yourself to everyone.
Yeah, and Jared, before we go there, I guess the one thing I would say, I think this is where we need to truly work with the developers, right? And not say, hey, developers are the bad guy. And especially when we have larger developments coming in, right? You have some room over multiple phases to say what fits. And the example I've shared before, and I'll share again, because it is such a large development, is the one that's on, right off of Durfee there on the Mormon Trail.
Mm-hmm.
That's North Star, right? I mean, it's 1,000 acres, or, it's a, 20-year project in whole.
It's a big development.
Yeah, big development. I think we need to go and work with them. And so far, what I've seen, they've been good to work with, but say, hey, let's look at this. How can we set this up where I'll say it's the give and take, right? We're going to ask you to give us some large lots and some small lots across the whole thing, right? So we have that variety, right? So we'd like to see some larger lots. We want to see some 1-acre lots, that's some horse
Mm-hmm.
property. You come in and do all the half-acre, quarter-acre, third-acre lots. But with that, we do want some of those smaller lots, some smaller homes. But over the course of that, because of that difference, your density still maintains the same, right? So as you look at the zoning, the density, say, is supposed to be, 2 units per acre, right? So essentially we can say that's half-acre lots. That's not really how that, but it's 2 units per acre. So be in that give and take of, let's have an area, right? Let's designate 20 acres or some number, and you're going to, put smaller homes, smaller lots. So those could potentially be those starter homes.
Yeah,
right?
and
then with that, you're going to have some larger lots that now you're selling some others that are going to be, actually in today's market, who knows, they may almost be $1 million homes in that same area, right? They may be half a mile down the road when it's all said and done, but your density, right, the number of homes in that whole area maintain the same, and that's where we need it. The thing is, with this to come in and say, hey, build $100,000 home, is that even possible in the market with the lumber and costs like that?
That's right? The big question. What's the smallest lot Grantsville allows first? And I think it's 0.18 of an acre.
So the smallest zoning, it would be like an RM7, which would be a 7,000 square foot lot.
Okay.
Now there's only a few of those. They're probably right in the heart of town, right? So you can go pretty small, but those are limited. Beyond that, yeah, you're right. Then in that 18.
Yeah, 0.18 of an acre, and that's pretty universal across everywhere in Utah. But but what those starter homes are is that's where a a person or a family gets in, initial buy, maybe plans on living there 5 to 7 years, but that's where they build the equity to buy the other home. Otherwise, all we build these great big houses, and either your community becomes so house strapped that the rest of the community around them dies because they can't afford to, circulate into the community, or you get, the, people driving from around the mountain to live over here, and that runs your kids out of town.
Yeah.
And so we've got to think about that. And why can't we, brought this up last night, why can't we build apartment buildings that you can buy?
How high can we build, Eric? What's the legal limit in Grantsville? How high?
Yeah. So right now it is 35 feet.
Right.
And there's some difference of, I've asked this multiple times. So one thing I'll throw out there, I'm a member of the volunteer fire department here in Grantsville, right?
Mm-hmm.
And one of the things I've heard is, well, we didn't have a ladder truck, right?
Mm-hmm.
Well, we do have one, and no one can really tell me why that's there. I have suggested that we need to be looked at it. And one of the things I've thrown out as the example is, with the Romney group and that development that's going there along Sheep's Lane, right? I'll say the hope, it absolutely is, that becomes an area, right, where maybe we end up with some hotels, right, that are coming in because of the racetrack. And as that develops out, I would hate to lose out on a business because someone that's wanting to come in and build a hotel that would be over 35 feet, they read in there, that can't happen.
Yeah.
Right? So I do think that, and I've asked that it be reviewed. That is something that, will be on the agenda for both planning and zoning and city council to look at that, because it seems like an arbitrary number, right? What is it? And can we make some differences? Maybe for a home, right? Residential, single family house, right? We may want it 35, right?
Yeah.
But to allow, some others, whether it's apartments, right? And that's, whether that's apartments that I'm renting or allowing for more of a condo style where I can come and buy, and I'll use condo because to me that separates that, where I buy my unit
out here. And I think we need to start looking at that. You got the townhome option, you've got the condo option, and that's just vernacular. It's the same thing with different vernacular, but I think that may need to be something that needs to be looked at.
Absolutely.
Because just renting, I mean, essentially you're just paying to live. You're not building any equity. You're not building any value. You're not building any mobility. And I think we need to figure out how to add that into the equation.
I completely agree. Yeah.
When you have higher buildings, you can conserve more water. So if you want to pack a family,
because you make the toilet
system
upstairs flush into the square part of the toilet, the next floor, and then flush. Right. It works. You don't want to be on the bottom floor. That's all I got to say. But
well, you got to build them higher and taller if you want to pack in that conservation of water. And if we're not going to use some sort of price jacking of the water system, you're going to have to figure something out. It's going to be a very interesting next 4 years for how this area grows. I'll tell you that. We say
that, but it may not. We might have.
We don't have that crystal ball.
We might have the 80s rain. Remember the 80s when it rained and they pulled us out of elementary school to fill sandbags?
Sandbags.
Yeah. Over there on not West Street, Cooley.
It was running down Cooley. Cooley was the river.
Yeah.
And that's the thing, as we go up, right? I don't want to see the day that Grantsville skyscrapers, right? I mean, I don't think we just go unlimited, right? I don't think we look that, but
that's what I was just thinking. Skyscrapers would be a rough thing, but we was talking to a guy that's running for city council here in Tooele, and he was bringing up some pretty neat ideas. And I don't know how this would work with the developer or how it would work, but he says, they're talking about building apartments, and I would say it'd be cool if they mix condos in there, and then maybe on the outskirts of that, single family homes, but kind of in the middle of that, kind of a strip mall with a gas station and a food mart and things like that. And so it also, not only did it do that, but it made it kind of a walking neighborhood.
Yeah.
So the things available, the immediate things you need, I need a Snickers at 8 at night or whatever, you can just walk over and grab it, and that makes more sense and easier than getting in your car. You know?
Yeah, and I think with some of the mixed use zoning that we just put in place, again, going back to the mat, right? And I think that would allow for some of that. You know, is Grantsville ready to the point where you have retail and commercial on the first floor and you have, 1 to 2 stories above it for residential? I don't know, but I will say the one thing I've learned is if a developer is going to come in and they're putting out the money, they've done their research. They know what they're not going to waste money on something that's going to do. So I don't think we can just say, hey, that's not Grantsville, right? If the developer's coming in, because Grantsville, for the good, isn't the same Grantsville you and I grew up in, Jared. It's grown, right?
Yeah.
And we still want to maintain some of the traditions and some of those things that we love about Grantsville, but recognize it still isn't going to be the same, right? It is going to change. It's going to grow. It's going to develop as even residents, lifelong residents, right? Stay here, move in. For my kids, it might be something like that gets them to want to live in Grantsville.
Well,
right?
and
Because they have those conveniences and they like the idea of just being able to, as they're starting off, walk down from their apartment and walk into a convenience store and grab it till they can get to that starter home.
yeah, and it could and it incentivizes more commercial and industrial to come closer. Also, the larger the city, the more incentive there is to try to start your own business because you have the availability for more customers, where, we sit in kind of a rare spot where, and Tooele sits kind of in the same, where a lot of businesses, if a guy was going to start up, say, a computer repair shop, he would probably think about it quite hard because there's not enough business out here, or there probably is, but he's got to worry, is there enough to keep me running?
As you mentioned that, what I was thinking about is your brother's place, Guzzle.
Yeah. Now
I remember when I saw that on the planning and zoning agenda, I thought, I really, place. I just go to Jay's to get my Pepsi.
Yeah.
Right. I don't need to have fancy stuff. And there's a line there, and I'll admit, I'm good with I'll go get my Mountain Dew with my peach in it once in a while or whatever. So
it's
that's
quick.
the thing.
It's easy. If there's not a line, you stop in.
There's always a line.
There is always a line.
We could probably make our own Guzzle, call it Gizzle, and we still have enough business.
Yeah, but that's the thing. You can't just have that mindset of that doesn't fit here, right? Because to me, that was one where I'm like, really?
Yep.
I mean, I wasn't gonna, I'm not gonna stop at all for it, but I'm like, really? And yeah, they've done well, right? So just to say that doesn't work, we can't.
Eric, I agree, and I'm glad Vince took that chance. I'm just saying the guy that wants to spark out, has an idea, has that thirst, he might think that. And I would tell them, take your shot, do it. Regardless, you might lose your butt. This might be a big learning, but take your shot. You got to.
Eric, did you think that idea was not going to actually succeed when it first came across your planning zone? Honestly.
So my thought is, to me, that wasn't, I guess I looked at, for me, I'm just going to Jay's. I'm just getting that Pepsi, right? I don't need all that extra in it. And that was just my mindset of like, really, do people want all this extra? So I think in that mindset, I wasn't sure it was going to be successful.
Okay.
Yeah.
Interesting.
And then I think he's doubled down on the intelligence because he used the Grantsville colors, named it Cowboy Bob.
Oh, absolutely. He uses the G.
Yeah. And even in Tooele, they've added in Tooele-centric drinks and most of that's
done well, for sure.
Most of that's Mackenzie. I shouldn't give Vince all the credit. Mackenzie's she's the muscle behind it for sure. Yeah. She does a lot down there. Yeah. But yeah, it's a brilliant idea, and that place is always busy, always popular, and it's a place where the teenagers seek to work.
Yeah, mm-hmm. Yeah, and I use that as something isn't Grantsville, something isn't Tooele County, right? We have to, if someone has an idea, we have to make it work, right? We have to accommodate it, and I know we're getting here on time, but with Grantsville, right? They talk about Main Street being that business corridor, right?
Yeah.
But the other side is Main Street of Grantsville is a lot of residents, right? There's not a lot of open space for businesses to come in. So if someone's coming in there, we want to invite them in. One, we need to make Main Street look a little bit better, right? And we can work on that. But we have to make allowances, right? So right down the street from Guzzle, the auto zone, right? We had to make some changes because it would not fit in that lot based upon current, requirements of setbacks. Well, that's going to be the case through a lot. So we have to be welcoming to business and saying, hey, come to us with a proposal, whether we think it's going to fit or not, tell us that there's the need, and how do we make it work? How do we work together and say, okay, yep, we know you were supposed to have 12 feet, but there's only 10 feet of setback. Okay. But that's what it is. And if we want a business there, we'll do the 10 feet, right? Work with that. Right. And find those businesses, find those individuals that are out there that want to have that business and bring them in. I've seen it where we have embraced. We've had a daycare provider that started as a home business in her basement till eventually she moved and was able to, build a whole building, right? So we have seen that in the town, but we have to, work with, locals that want to start off their businesses, and how do we make it? How do we get them, as they start as that home-based business that we're always providing, and move them into the next thing, right? We have to do that, as well as look for other business opportunities, right? That aren't local, we can bring businesses in, bring retail, bring commercial out by welcoming them through ordinances, by setting up areas that say, hey, here's a spot that we want business. That's right. We need to do that.
Yeah, the city needs to be dynamic and inviting.
All right.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, sounds good. I have to say this at every time after talking to one of you guys running. I don't think there's a bad candidate. I can tell you, all you guys are great. You guys all have your head in the game. Everyone's come in with I would say they've come in with a substantial amount of knowledge and thoughts, and they've all seemed really open. So I'm happy to see that.
Yeah, and I appreciate anyone that's gonna throw their hat in the ring. I've ran before. It's not easy. You get beat up a lot on social media. You can't go to Solberg's without running into someone. Stopped in there a couple weeks ago, and an hour later, I was still standing by the milk talking to somebody, and people were going back and forth. Right? It is tough. So anyone that's going to do it, it takes a lot, and their willingness, to say, hey, I want to serve. I absolutely believe all of us have, in our own way, right? We have the best interest of Grantsville. That's why we're doing it. That's there may be some unique why, but it really was for the best interest in Grantsville. And I truly believe that's, why everyone for city council, the two mayoral candidates, that's why we're all running, is we, truly do love Grantsville and what it is. And we want to see it, continue to be a great place, and have, how do we make it great for those future generations?
Yeah. Yeah. Keep it great, keep it prosperous and thriving.
Yep. Yeah. Keep Grantsville great.
Yeah.
Again.
Yeah. Make Grantsville great again hats.
Yeah.
The red and white would fit. We just have to put black on there somewhere and
just trim the words out in black. Right?
Yeah. And then that would be Grantsville right there.
Eric, are you a Republican or a Democrat?
I am registered Republican.
Okay.
He asked everyone this. I've tried telling him before.
I know.
If we interview someone that says they're a Democrat, I might fall out of this chair.
I will say this, and not to get off on it. I work for Oracle, right? Software company, global. I've traveled a lot, and just interactions with people. I work with one individual, and he tells me he's a Republican. But to hear him speak, if he lived in Utah, I would have to call him a Democrat.
So he's a progressive Republican.
Yes, yeah. It's just the nature of, and I think there's the same thing. There probably are some Democrats in Utah, Tooele County, in other parts of the country would be a Republican.
Our Democrats are more Republican than most of the people I know in New York.
I work with a Democrat that if he got dropped into that that New York, any New York Republican or any New York Democrat, they would throw him out of the party. They'd think he was a Republican
Yeah.
or a crazy Republican, a hyper conservative, and yeah. But I think it's just geographical location. But
It is.
Grantsville ran Democrat for a long time, and then around the '60s, it swapped. It just happened, as far as I know, historically speaking.
Yeah.
And there used to not be a big difference between the parties either. But yeah, Dave asked that to everyone, and
It's fair game.
it is, and and it's a fine question. Yeah, I like the idea. I should start with my vocal message on housing. I should start showing up to city meetings and just raising my hand once in a while and asking the question. And
Jared wants a government program for housing.
keeping the bug light.
Yeah.
Actually, my program is let's get some of the government out of it and allow these houses to be built, because
Good luck.
I'm going to lay it out like this. Okay. Talking to someone, they laid out the average impact fee to cut a house. The regulatory fees are around $20,000, right? You got the water impact fee and going through all the inspectors. We've got to figure out how to get that price lower, because nobody is going to build a $150,000 house and then try to have someone else get a loan for a $150,000 house when there's a $20,000 loss initially, because no bank's going to give that loan. And so we've got to figure out how to. I'm always about, if we can get the government out, let's get them out. And no bank's going to give a loan when there is a 7% loss right the minute you sign. No bank, or not a 7%. That'd be what, about a 15% loss? Not a good math guy, but no bank's going to give that loan when that loss is just right there, right off the get. And so the cities, I think, need to figure out how to make it so that developers are willing to build that, because they can't sell them. And if they can't sell them, they're not going to build them.
I just don't think it's possible anymore, Jared. I'll be honest with you. I mean,
I know.
$20,000 on $100,000 is 20%, by the way, but that's just numbers.
But I said 20,000 on 150,000.
All right.
That'd be about 15%, right?
Now you're getting complicated for me.
He can't do math either.
Not after drinking this
He
stuff.
just looks smart.
And I think that's the thing, Jared. As you said, I think what we have to be careful is we can't not have those impact fees, right? Because that's what's paying for the infrastructure, right? That's what's getting us the water. That's what's going to, maintain the sewer, right? Which, we know where we're at. I think others have talked probably about that here in Grantsville, right? So just to say, hey, we're going to discount some of the impact fees, that has to still be made up, right? In that.
What if?
I think there's other ways maybe to look at it and say, and maybe it's not so much, I hate to put it this way, maybe it's the developer, because they're going to find ways to make up their money, right? When you're talking these large developments, they have it. I think where that scenario you're talking about, where that has more of an impact, is that individual that's just going to come in and build a home on a lot.
Well,
Right? Because they don't have any way of shuffling those monies. I'm going to say the developers are smart enough and good enough at what they do. They can still do it and find a way to make it up.
They're still going to go for the bang for the buck. They're still going to go for it. But what if? Here's a crazy notion. What if the city? So, how much what's the impact fee to build on a 1 acre lot?
I'd have to pull it up to
say
see
it's
it all,
20.
yeah.
Let's just guess
Yeah.
it's 20,000, and the impact fee to build on a 1/4 acre lot, 20,000. What if we offered the developers the opportunity to build 4 houses on a 1 acre lot, split them into 1/4 acre lots, drive a road down the middle of it like a cul-de-sac, and made that a $20,000 impact fee? And would that be a substantial loss to the city on that? Whereas instead of the $80,000 they'd pull in, which it would be a substantial loss, but if they all ran on one water head and one sewer head, maybe not. And once it hits the curb, it's their responsibility, the water and the sewer.
Might be just cheaper to build a skyscraper, Jared.
Yeah, but then man, I know you want to turn us into your foreign country. I don't want that just yet.
Hey, look, it's all about efficiency.
I don't want your foreign country yet. I don't want it yet. He's from New York, so he's.
Not. I'm gonna say not in my lifetime to go that high.
I
I'll go
could see
visit New
going.
York,
I
but-
could see going. I could see Grantsville adjusting to say, okay, we'll go 4 stories on apartments because right now we can run 3 stories.
Yeah.
We often only run 2 stories, and then they've got a workable attic type situation where they can run water. But I could say, okay, we could go 4 stories, blend it in, whatever. But man, you take away the view of Deseret Peak with the skyscraper, and there'll be torches and pitchforks. It'll be.
Yeah, we're seeing that with the one that's 3-story homes, right? People were worried about their view out to the west.
Yeah.
So,
But
yeah,
a skyscraper would take it away for a substantial part of the city, like all the city.
It also offer it to a substantial part of the population.
Mm.
But I mean, like, just let the free market do its thing, relax on the regulations, and you'll be surprised what society can come up with.
That I think is the wonder. I think that's the fine line. On a side note, you can go it's a video game thing. It's one where you build like a city. And the guy videotaped this, and it's supposed to be the most realistic game. I don't know the name of it, and it's probably way out of my league to play, but
Minecraft.
no, it's you're supposed to build a city, and he wanted to do it as a prank, and he did the, I don't know, the video game movie one, Twitch or whatever, and he says, I'm going to run it complete anarchy, and so he shut off all the regulations, and it turned out that the game, when you did that, ran. Now, I'm not saying this exactly lines up with the real life, but the city exploded and ran better than when he laid regulations on it. But that's just a thought, just something I'm throwing out there.
It's like Hong Kong.
yeah,
Yeah,
I'm not sure I'd want to test it.
well,
in real
maybe.
life.
I don't know.
That's why you're a Republican, Eric.
I don't know. But yeah, I am a free market guy. I like that. But I just want to put the bug in your ear. We need to figure out how to get your kids a house.
No, and I agree. I mean, I look at it, and and I think, as we think about again, 20 story skyscrapers is not Grantsville, but to go higher, sure. And if it eventually we get there, but I think we can look at it and say, where would that fit, right? Is that to the east? Is it to the north? Right? Where could we make it fit? And I think there's the space, and we don't have that impact on everyone that wants to look up towards the peak.
Yeah, and we also have to look at, can our ground withstand it?
Yeah.
Because even in New York, there's a reason why only skyscrapers are on Manhattan.
Yeah.
And that's because that's the only ground that can handle
we may
it.
run into that.
And that's the thing. Our ground may not handle it, or it might,
Yeah.
How hard is it to build a skyscraper in the desert? I think Vegas has proved it's definitely possible, but
We can handle mountains from the Rocky Mountain range. I think we can handle a skyscraper.
we're not in the Rocky Mountain range.
Well, we're close enough for me.
We're in the Great Basin.
Yeah.
We're quite a ways from the Rocky Mountain range. But yeah, and I don't know. That's all stuff, and I'm sure it could handle it, but God, that'd just be ugly. We may as well just put a big scar down the middle of the valley. Just a scab. And make it smell bad, like it's infected. Anyways, Eric, thanks for coming on.
Absolutely. Again, I appreciate it. Really grateful for the opportunity. And, like I say, we can only get so much done in 3 minutes in some of those events. And
Yeah.
so.
Yeah. And people don't come back at you, Yeah. And we're probably not the ideal guys to come back at you. We should probably one time find someone who knows what's going on and have them join us to question the candidates. But, the candidates are good, but with us, you get what you get.
No, and I was gonna say, I like what you guys have going on, right? As you said, I mean, and we talked about it's a different time, right? This is how, a lot of us get our information, right? We're out there looking for the videos, whether it's YouTube, it's Facebook, and so what you're doing and putting out there, and I'll say, hey, if I get elected, or even if I don't, I'm staying on planning and zoning. But let's make it a regular thing and talk about city, right? And maybe
Yeah.
that's, I ask you guys, reach out and say, hey, let's get the city mayors on once a quarter, once a month, so often, and just kind of the state of what's happening in the towns. And, I think that's, I'll say if I could, probably the most frustrating thing I've seen from planning and zoning, and even in city council, is just the lack of awareness sometimes with the residents of what's going on till maybe it's a little bit too late. And maybe the city can do a little bit more proactively, but I think if we find these other outlets to get the message across, right?
Well,
Through,
yeah.
this podcast you're doing, you mentioned YouTube. I like that idea of having the city work on putting something together, right? So the information's out there and the residents can be informed and educated. So then when they speak to a city council member or someone on planning and zoning, they're coming to a public hearing, right? They know what's going on and they can express. It's really hard to do something opposite of what we're getting presented in front of us when we don't have any public input.
I probably need to reach out. I need to come to a county or a city meeting and talk to you guys about that. Maybe I can figure out how to put together a YouTube commercial for Grantsville, and we could see what we could work up. Because I put stuff on YouTube. A couple times a week I'm throwing stuff up there. So maybe we could maybe I could come out and we could see what it'd look like. Put together a sample.
There's a
And
lot
do
of
it for-
opportunities.
Do
with
it for
this internet.
Tooele also,
Yeah, absolutely.
and the county. Another thing is, how many of the residents of Grantsville do you think know the mayor? Because I think I've been to Solberg's 20% of the time when I did not see him and did not chat with him. Or going hunting in the morning. You see him at Jay's. He's down
Yep.
there drinking his coffee and you stop and shoot the breeze with him, He's down there. So, and maybe people don't understand that he is that available. If you're out and about town, you're going to trip over him. He's somewhere wandering around, and I'm sure whoever wins the next race will be the same way because it's that small of a town that you know people.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, everyone's at the same spot, right? I mean, we don't have a mayor's mansion that they're off living someplace else with security that's keeping them, right? I mean,
Go ahead.
whether it's the mayor or city council, we are in the community. We're out and about. You're going to run into us.
Yep. All right. Well, Eric, thanks for coming on. Dave's got to step out. There's a noise at the door, and but thanks for coming on. And so I am going to let you and I stay in touch, and I'm gonna try to work with the city, and we'll see what we can do about an idea of putting the message out in this quick, chewable video format, and bounce some ideas off. But yeah, I think you guys, you got a great message, and I don't know. I feel positive for Grantsville. That's my old hometown. That's where I'm originally from, and my family, most of my family, all still lives there, and I do want to see it grow, but I want to see it grow in a positive direction, and I don't know what that is, but I don't want to see it tumble off any edge or revert. And I know that a lot of people are afraid of the growth, but it's going to happen anyway.
It is, and that's the thing. I'm the same way, right? It's going to grow. We need to manage it. And if I could, I absolutely. Let's stay in touch. I'd love the idea, regardless of the outcome in November. Hopefully I'm city council and we can talk something. But if not, we'll figure something out. We'll get the message out there. And the last thing I'm going to say, for anyone that's watching this, when it gets posted on, reach out, ask questions, right? I've said all along, I'm going to tell you what I think. I'm not going to try and guess what you want to hear. That's why I didn't, I don't beat around the bush. Growth is going to happen. I think it can be a good thing, right? I'm not going to, beat around it. And if I lose a vote because of it, I lose a vote, but I'd rather lose a vote because I was honest, then guess what you want to hear, right? So reach out. Let's have a conversation. And at the end of it, we might just have to say, hey, we agree to disagree. But let's talk, right? And see. I want to hear the thoughts of what the folks of Grantsville have to say.
Well, not just that, but if the city fights growth, the developers take the city to court, the developers win, growth happens anyway, and the city has to pay the developers extra. Either the city has to pay the developers in water shares or actual money, or they have to give them concessions that the people of the city aren't ready for. So, control it, be inviting and welcoming, and and hey, everyone wants to move there. It's your fault. You guys made a beautiful city.
Yeah.
You guys made an idyllic community. Now you got to live with that. You did that. Now everyone wants to move in and join in. And so manage it so you get the right people to follow behind the developers. Absolutely. Eric, thank you very much.
Good luck, Eric.
Yeah,
hey,
good
thank
luck.
You, Bill.
We will
Appreciate it.
And both of us are impartial to you. So we can say this open, good luck. We can't vote for you. We're both up here.
We're Tooele.
We'll get you to move. But,
yeah. I'd move back to Grantsville, eventually maybe, you know, if I find the right deal in the right circumstance. But yeah, we'll see how it comes out November, and we'll definitely, either way, we'll be chatting again.
Okay. No, I like it.
We'll stay in touch and touch base. I think that'd be a good plan to start working on the future. Make where Salt Lake and Provo, even, they all kind of have the news report on them and give updates to the city. It's nice to see Grantsville figure out how to do that and do it on the cheap. Yeah. All right. Have a wonderful night, and we'll talk to you real soon.
Take care.
Okay. Thank you.
Bye.